Before we begin the story, let us know where you're watching from by leaving a comment below. If you enjoy this video, don't forget to like and subscribe. Have a wonderful day. Enjoy the story, everyone. The third assistant in 3 days was crying. It was not a quiet type of crying. It was the loud, uncontrollable kind of sobbing that echoed through the marble halls of Carter Global, bouncing off the glass walls of the 35th floor like an emotional fire alarm. "You are fired," said Alexander Carter, his voice as sharp as the perfect crease of his $3,000 suit. His wheelchair was perfectly positioned behind the mahogany desk. He did not need to stand to command a room. His ice blue eyes did all the work. "But Mr. Carter, I only asked for 5 minutes to go to the restroom, and it took 7. He checked his Rolex. "Efficiency is not negotiable in this company, Miss Lawson. Human resources will process your exit. Have a good day." The door had barely closed when the whispers began. On the other side of the glass, curious faces multiplied like frightened rabbits. Assistants, analysts, even the accounting team had abandoned their spreadsheets to witness yet another scene. 3 in 3 days, murmured Ethan from finance, adjusting his glasses. "That's a record, even for him." "Sophia lasted 4 hours on Monday," whispered Lila from marketing, pretending to organize papers. "He fired her because she said good morning with too much enthusiasm." "Victoria lasted until Tuesday lunch," added Ryan, the intern, wide-eyed. "She brought sushi." "He hates sushi. No one survives a full week with Mr. Carter," Lila concluded, shaking her head. "No one." Inside the office, Alexander turned his chair toward the large window. Manhattan stretched at his feet like a chessboard he had mastered for years. Since the accident, no, he did not call it an accident. He called it an inconvenience. Nothing had been the same. And if he demanded perfection from everyone around him, well, it was the least he could do when his own body had decided not to cooperate. The door opened without a knock. Only one person in the world had permission to do that: Alexander James Carter. The voice was firm, aristocratic, and carried decades of unquestionable authority. Eleanor Carter entered the room the same way she always did, as if the space had been built specifically for her presence. Silver hair in a neat bun, pearl necklace, gray suit that cost more than a small car. "Mother, do not mother me." She stopped in front of the desk, arms crossed. 3 assistants, Alexander. 3 in 3 days. They were incompetent. They were human beings with bladders and a liking for Japanese food. Eleanor sighed, the kind of sigh that carried 50 years of dealing with stubborn Carter men. "You are impossible. I am efficient. You are alone." The silence that followed was as heavy as concrete. Alexander tightened his grip on the arms of the wheelchair but kept his expression neutral. He had practiced that mask for months, years. "In fact, I have a company to run. You have a life to live." Eleanor leaned over the desk. "And now you have an appointment with me. We are going to have coffee. I have a board meeting in 20 minutes, which I rescheduled for an hour from now." She smiled, victorious. "Your assistant well." Your former assistant confirmed it before she was dismissed. Alexander closed his eyes. Of course she had done that. "Mother, do not argue. You need to clear that bad temper before meeting the board. And I need a cappuccino." She was already heading to the door. "Come now." Arguing with Eleanor Carter was as productive as arguing with a hurricane. Alexander took a deep breath, unlocked his chair, and followed her. The cafe was on the building's ground floor, a modern space with minimalist pendant lights and light wood tables. It was one of the few places where Alexander could be relatively anonymous, although anonymous was a loose term when you were the CEO of one of the largest tech corporations in the country and arrived in a custom-made wheelchair that cost more than a college education. The line was long. Naturally, Eleanor did not get in line. She simply walked up to the counter as if she had a permanent reservation, which, thinking about it, she probably did. That was when Alexander heard it. "Okay, Claire Mitchell, you can do this. It's just a cappuccino. You've been doing this for 3 years. 3 years. This is not heart surgery. It's coffee with foam. Coffee with foam." He frowned. A voice came from behind the counter. A young woman with brown hair pulled into a slightly crooked ponytail, wearing a uniform with a milk stain on the sleeve, was staring at the coffee machine as if it were a quantum supercomputer, and she was talking to herself. "All right, press the button. The right button. That one. No, not that one. The other one, the other one. Claire." She pressed the button. The machine made a sound that was definitely not normal. A jet of steam escaped from the side, followed by a splash of milk that hit her shirt. "Fantastic. Now I look like I fought a cow and lost." Eleanor turned to Alexander. her eyes shining with something he had not seen in a long time. Genuine amusement. She's wonderful. She's a disaster. Exactly. The young woman, apparently Claire, finally managed to produce something that looked like a cappuccino. She placed it on the tray with excessive care, as if she were carrying a very soft pudding that could collapse at any moment. All right, done. Cappuccino. No explosions, just the shirt and my dignity. But the coffee is perfect. She looked at the cup. At least I think it is. Do you look nice, cappuccino? Presentable? Because I don't. But you need to make up for it. Eleanor approached the counter. Dear. Claire lifted her eyes, startled, as if she had not noticed there were real customers in the cafe. Oh, hi. Hello. Yes, how can I help you? Of course I can. It's literally my job. She laughed. Nervous. Sorry. I was testing the machine. Quality check. Very important. Very professional. Eleanor smiled. 2 cappuccinos, please. And don't worry about the machine. My son here is an expert at making expensive equipment, refused to cooperate. Alexander shot his mother a deadly look. Claire blinked, looked at Alexander, and her face turned slightly red. Oh, you're Mr. Place. Carter, the CEO of the entire building, who technically pays me indirectly through several levels of hierarchy, but still. She took a deep breath. All right, Claire, stop talking. Make the coffee. Impress the billionaire. Don't spill anything on him. Alexander raised an eyebrow. She really talked to herself out loud all the time. 2 cappuccinos, she repeated, turning quickly to the machine. Too simple. Easy. You can do this. Eleanor leaned toward Alexander and whispered, I want her. What? As your assistant? Alexander nearly choked. You're joking. I am completely serious. Eleanor watched Claire with the same expression she used when she found a rare antique at an auction. She's perfect. She talks to coffee machines. And you talk to Excel spreadsheets at 3 a.m. We all have our quirks. Before Alexander could respond, Claire turned around with 2 perfectly made cappuccinos, the foam forming small hearts. Here they are. 2 cappuccinos. No victims. Today was a good day. Eleanor took the cups, handed one to Alexander, and then did something completely unexpected. She took a business card from her purse and slid it across the counter. Dear, have you ever thought about changing careers? Claire took the card. Confused. What? Human Resources, 12th floor. Tell them. Mrs. Carter sent you. Monday, 9 a.m. Don't be late. And then Eleanor simply walked out, leaving Alexander frozen in his chair and Claire staring at the card as if it were a treasure map written in Mandarin. Wait, what just happened? Claire looked at Alexander. Your mother just offered me a job here in this building? The same building where you fired 3 people in 3 days? Alexander closed his eyes. Welcome to my personal nightmare, Miss Mitchell. And then he wheeled out, pushing the chair harder than necessary, while behind him, Claire murmured, All right. That was surreal. Completely surreal. Should I accept? Should I refuse? Was I just recruited by a queen of the corporate world while I had milk on my shirt? Eleanor was waiting in the hallway, smiling like the cat that had eaten the canary. She's perfect, Alexander. She's chaotic, Mother. She's exactly what you need. Eleanor took a sip of the cappuccino, someone who isn't afraid to say what she thinks, even if she says it to herself. Alexander looked at his mother, then at the cafe, then back at his mother, and for the first time in months, he felt something other than the constant anger he carried inside his chest. Curiosity, which somehow was even more dangerous. Claire Mitchell was in the wrong elevator. She was sure of it because the right elevator, the one used by baristas and maintenance staff for the service floors, definitely did not have Italian marble flooring and mirrors that made you question all your life choices. Okay, Claire, you pressed the wrong button. She murmured to her reflection, which looked just as confused. Just press it again. Go back to the ground floor. Pretend none of this ever happened. But before she could press anything, the doors opened on the 35th floor, and there stood a woman in a navy blue suit, holding a clipboard and a smile that seemed designed by a corporate robot. Claire Mitchell? Ah, yes. Claire held the empty tray she had brought from the cafe. At least it could serve as a shield if things got complicated. But I think there must be a mistake. I just came to ask about the matter Mrs. Carter mentioned yesterday. And perfect. Please follow me. The woman turned on her high heels with military precision. Wait, where are we going? To your workstation, of course. Claire blinked. My what now? But the woman was already marching down the glass and steel hallway. And Claire, because apparently she had lost all control of her own life, followed her. The 35th floor was intimidating in a way that made the cafe feel like a playground. Everything was white, gray, and chrome. People in expensive suits typed on computers that probably cost more than her car. No one smiled. No one made eye contact. It felt like walking into a science fiction episode where robots pretended to have corporate lives. Here it is. The woman stopped in front of a huge glass desk placed strategically right in front of an imposing door with a plaque. Alexander Carter, CEO. Claire felt her stomach drop. I'm sorry, but why is there a desk in front of Mr. Carter's office? Because it's your desk. The woman smiled and handed her an ID badge. Welcome to Carter Global, Miss Mitchell. I'm Jessica from HR. Mrs. Carter personally requested your hiring process this morning. Claire looked at the badge. Claire Mitchell, Executive Secretary, CEO. This must be a mistake. No mistakes. Jessica handed her a thick folder. Here is your employee handbook, computer password, access to Mr. Carter's calendar. And yes, she picked up an iPad from the desk, your management device. Mr. Carter has a meeting in 15 minutes. He prefers black coffee, no sugar, in a white ceramic mug. Temperature between 82 and 85 degrees Celsius. Claire blinked. You must be joking. Carter Global does not joke about coffee temperature. Jessica checked her watch. Good luck. And then she simply left. Claire stood there holding the badge, the iPad, the folder, and what was left of her dignity. Okay, Claire, breathe. She placed everything on the desk. This is some kind of test, right? Like those TV shows where they put you in absurd situations and film your reaction. There must be cameras. She looked around. Hello, production team. You can stop now. I'll sign the release form. No one answered because, of course, there were no cameras. Only the absolutely unbelievable reality that Eleanor Carter had somehow turned a barista who talked to coffee machines into the executive secretary of the most feared CEO in Manhattan. All right. Claire sat in a leather chair that probably cost more than 3 months of rent. Act natural. Pretend you know what you're doing. What does an assistant even do? She looked at the computer, then at the phone with more buttons than an airplane control panel. Then at Alexander Carter's office door, which was closed and radiated an aura of walk-in and you're fired. Maybe I should just sit here. Quiet. Decorative. That's a skill, right? At that moment, the door opened. Alexander Carter appeared in his wheelchair, wearing a charcoal gray suit and an expression that could freeze the sun. His eyes met Claire's. He stopped for 3 full seconds. No one said a word. Then, Alexander sighed, the kind of sigh that carried the weight of 1,000 questionable decisions, and turned the wheelchair back into the office. Come in. It was not a request. Claire stood so fast she almost dropped the iPad. Yes, of course. Coming in. She tripped over her own leg, recovered, and stepped through the doorway like a baby giraffe learning to walk. Alexander's office was exactly what she expected. Minimalist, flawless, and intimidating. An entire glass wall showed Manhattan stretching to the horizon. Awards and certificates were aligned with military precision. No personal photos, no human touch. Alexander sat behind the desk, fingers interlaced, watching her with the same expression a scientist would use to study a new species of insect. So, he said, his voice dangerously calm, you're my new assistant. Technically, apparently, surprisingly, yes. Claire laughed, nerveux. But look, I think there's a huge misunderstanding here because I work at the coffee shop. And I can make a wonderful cappuccino. But I know nothing about, she gestured vaguely, whatever executives do. My mother hired you. Your mother is frightening. Alexander's eyebrows rose by 1 millimeter. Repeat that. I mean, Claire corrected quickly. Your mother is amazing, powerful, inspiring, a queen. Truly, she has a queen's energy. I kind of want her to adopt me. But I'm also afraid of disappointing her. Which is confusing because I met her. Like, yesterday. But, Miss Mitchell. Claire closed her mouth. Alexander leaned back in his chair, his eyes examining every inch of her. Do you have administrative experience? No. Business training? I have a degree in literature, which basically means I can discuss Shakespeare while serving coffee. Professional references? My manager at the coffee shop said I'm punctual most of the time when I don't miss the subway. Alexander stayed silent for a moment that felt like an eternity. Then he picked up the phone. Could you call my mother, please? Claire felt panic rise. Look, Mr. Carter, I understand you're upset, But your mother was very kind. And I really need this job because my apartment has a leak. And my cat needs vaccines. And you have a cat? Yes? His name is Sir Paws. He's orange and judges all my life decisions. Something very small, so small Claire almost missed it, passed through Alexander's eyes. Interest, amusement, confusion about why he had not simply called security. Before he could respond, the phone rang. Alexander, dear. Eleanor's voice came through on speaker. How is my new favorite hire? Mother, we need to talk about how she's perfect. I completely agree. Transfer her to my office, or I will. She has no experience. The other three had no interesting flaws, and look how that ended. She talks to herself, and you talk to spreadsheets. At least her comments are humorous. Claire wanted to melt into the floor and disappear. Alexander closed his eyes, clearly fighting an internal battle. When he opened them again, there was something new there. Not acceptance, not happiness, but resignation with a touch of curious disbelief. Very well. He hung up and looked at Claire. You stay. I stay. Under one condition. He leaned forward. I will make this the hardest week of your life. You will want to quit. You will beg to go back to the coffee shop. And when that happens, and it will happen, you will admit that my mother was wrong. Claire swallowed hard. This is like a challenge. It's a prediction. They stared at each other for a tense moment. Then Claire, for reasons she did not fully understand, smiled. I accept. Alexander blinked. What? I accept your challenge. 1 week. Let's see who gives up first, you for dealing with me, or me for surviving you. And at that moment, Alexander Carter realized 2 things. First, his mother was far more manipulative than he had imagined. Second, he had just made the worst bet of his life. Your first task, he said, pointing to the door, is to organize my calendar for the next 3 days. No conflicts, no mistakes, no questions. Claire nodded, turned with exaggerated confidence, and almost walked into the glass door. I knew it was there. Reflex test. We passed. When she finally left, Alexander looked up at the ceiling and murmured, What did I do to deserve this? Outside, Claire sat at the desk, opened the iPad, looked at the screen full of color-coded appointments that looked like hieroglyphs, and whispered, All right, Sir Paws. If I never return, you inherit my mug collection. And while she tried to figure out the difference between alpha-level board meeting and green strategic call, Alexander watched through his office window, 3 assistants in 3 days. But this one was going to be interesting. The conference room looked like it had been designed to intimidate. A polished mahogany table reflecting the recessed lights above, leather chairs that probably cost more than a semester of college, and 12 executives in identical suits looking at Claire as if she were an alien who had just landed on Wall Street, which, technically, was not far from the truth. All right, Claire, she whispered to herself, adjusting the tablet she had been trusted with 10 minutes earlier. You can do this. It's only a meeting. You've served coffee to important people. This is basically the same, just without the coffee, and with a much greater chance of public embarrassment. Alexander entered the conference room, his wheelchair moving quietly across the gray carpet. He did not even look at her, just positioned himself at the head of the table with the authority of someone who had built that empire. Good morning, he said. And immediately all the executives sat up straighter. Claire tried to do the same, but her elbow hit the tablet, which slipped off the table and fell to the floor with a sound that echoed like thunder. Pairs of eyes turned to her. Sorry, she murmured, quickly picking up the tablet. It was slippery, a traitor. I'll sue Apple later. A man with thick-framed glasses frowned. Alexander cleared his throat. Miss Mitchell will be joining the meeting today. Please proceed with the reports. One by one, the executives began their presentations. Numbers, charts, growth projections that made Claire's head spin. She tried to take notes, but half the time she did not understand the corporate language. Q4 showed a 23% growth in the B2B segment, said a bald man from finance. Is that good? Claire whispered to herself. Sounds good. 23, a solid number. The man paused, looking at her. I'm sorry. I was just confirming mentally. Please continue. Alexander pressed 2 fingers to his temple as if a headache was forming in real time. Then she walked in. Laura Vance did not walk. She made an entrance. Perfectly styled blonde hair falling in waves over her shoulders. A fitted black dress that expressed power and money. Heels that made a sharp sound with every step. She was everything Claire was not. Polished, confident, and absolutely belonging to that world. Sorry for being late, Laura said with a smile that did not reach her eyes. She sat next to Alexander, placing a hand on the arm of his chair with practiced familiarity. "Alexander, dear, we need to discuss the third quarter launch campaign." "Dear." Claire felt something strange in her stomach, as if she had eaten an expired sandwich or jealousy. But obviously, it was not jealousy because she had known Alexander for literally 1.5 days. "Laura, this is not the moment," Alexander said, gently moving his arm away from the chair. "There's always time for strategy, Alexander." Laura finally looked at Claire, her eyes making a quick and clearly judgmental scan. "And who is this?" "Claire Mitchell, new executive assistant," Alexander answered, without emotion. "Assistant." Laura smiled, but it was not a kind smile. "How interesting. Where did you work before, Claire?" "At the coffee shop," Claire answered before thinking. "Complete silence. On the ground floor," she added, as if that made the situation better. "I made an excellent cappuccino. I won Employee of the Month twice. I have a certificate." The man with the glasses coughed, disguising what was definitely a laugh. Laura raised a perfectly shaped eyebrow. "Fascinating. Alexander has always had an eclectic taste in hiring. It was my mother's choice." Alexander cut in, and something in his tone made it clear the subject was closed. The meeting continued, but Claire could feel Laura's eyes on her like lasers. When they reached the design report, someone projected images of a new product on the screen. Alexander leaned forward, studying them with intensity, and Claire, without realizing it, murmured, "He looks like a millionaire penguin in an expensive suit." The silence that followed was overwhelming. 12 heads turned at the same time. Alexander froze, his fingers still above the tablet. Claire felt the blood leave her face. I said that out loud." No one answered, but their expressions confirmed that yes, she had absolutely said that out loud, not that penguins are bad. She rushed to explain. "Penguins are elegant, sophisticated, and the suit is beautiful, very expensive. Probably Italian or French or from somewhere that makes suits very well." The man with the glasses was biting his lip hard. The woman from marketing had her hand covering her mouth. Laura was looking at Claire as if she were a particularly irritating insect that needed to be crushed. Alexander, however, did something unexpected. He turned his face slightly, and Claire saw for just a second the corner of his mouth tremble. He was trying not to laugh. "Miss Mitchell," he said, his voice controlled but with something different in the tone. "Perhaps you should take quiet notes." "Yes, quiet. Definitely. Completely silent." Claire pretended to lock her lips and throw away the key. And then, because the universe clearly had something against her, she added, "But the comparison was positive. Penguins are wonderful. They mate for life, very loyal." The man with the glasses let out a muffled laugh. Alexander closed his eyes briefly, and this time Claire was certain she saw a tiny smile. Laura, however, did not find it amusing. "Perhaps," she said, her voice as cold as ice, "we should give the new assistant a few lessons on corporate etiquette. Clearly, there's a significant learning curve." "Laura," Alexander cut in, and there was a warning in his voice. "I'm only trying to help, Alexander." Laura stood, smoothing her dress. "After all, this company has standards to maintain. We don't want accidents damaging our image." She gave Claire one last look, the kind of look a woman in a long gown gives someone who just stepped on her train and left the room. The tension eased slightly. Alexander continued the meeting as if nothing had happened. But Claire noticed something different. He was not as rigid, and twice she caught him looking in her direction with something that almost seemed like curiosity. When the meeting finally ended, the executives walked out in a line, some giving Claire sympathetic looks, others clearly trying not to laugh. Only Alexander and Claire remained. "Miss Mitchell," he said without turning around. "I know," she sighed. "Fired. I understand. I'll get my things. And you compared me to a penguin. A stylish penguin in an expensive suit." He turned his chair, and Claire saw something that completely shocked her. Alexander Carter was almost smiling. "My mother was right," he said, more to himself than to her. "You're absolutely chaotic. Is that a compliment?" "No," but his tone suggested that maybe it was. He passed by her on his way to the door, then paused. "Laura doesn't like you. I noticed. That will make things complicated. More complicated than comparing my boss to a water bird?" This time, he definitely smiled small, quick, but it was there. "We shall see, Miss Mitchell, we shall see." And as he left, Claire stood there processing. Alexander Carter had almost laughed because of her. "Okay, Claire," she murmured, "you officially have no idea what's happening, but keep doing whatever this is. Apparently, chaos is working." Outside in the hallway, Laura watched through the glass wall, and for the first time in years, She felt something she was not used to feeling. Threatened. Claire had a theory. If you carried enough hot coffee, eventually you would develop superpowers of balance. That theory was about to be proven very wrong. It was 2 on a Thursday, and Alexander had a crucial presentation for Japanese investors. Claire had been instructed to do exactly one thing: bring coffee to the conference room without causing an international incident. "Okay, you can do this," she murmured, balancing the tray with 6 porcelain cups. "All you need to do is walk in a straight line. Humans have done that since they invented legs. You have legs, working legs most of the time." The hallway seemed longer than usual, or perhaps it was just the anxiety turning 10 meters into a marathon. She passed Lila's desk in marketing, who looked at the cups with the expression of someone watching a disaster in slow motion. "Good luck," Lila whispered, as if saying goodbye to someone going off to war. "Thank you. I'll need it." The conference room door was slightly open. Claire could hear Alexander's voice firm, professional, presenting growth projections in such a flawless way that it probably impressed even dictionaries. She took a deep breath and pushed the door with her shoulder. Everything happened in slow motion. The door opened faster than she expected. Her foot caught on the carpet, the tray tilted, and 6 cups of coffee began a chaotic dance of gravity and bad luck. Claire made a heroic attempt to save the situation, an effort that looked more like someone trying to hug an octopus than anything useful. 5 cups miraculously stayed on the tray. One was not so lucky. It flew in a perfect arc, as if competing in a coffee Olympics, and landed on the floor with a splash that echoed through the room like thunder. Dark coffee spread across the imported Persian rug that probably cost more than a car. Complete silence. 5 Japanese investors in perfect suits stared at her. Alexander had stopped mid-sentence, the presentation remote frozen in the air, and Claire, because apparently her brain chose that exact moment to abandon her, completely said out loud, "At least it fell on the expensive rug. It absorbs failure better." More silence. Then it happened. Alexander Carter laughed. It was not a polite laugh. It was not a restrained smile. It was a genuine, real laugh that began as a muffled sound and burst into something he clearly could not control. He covered his face with his hand, his shoulders shaking, trying to recover and failing completely. The entire room froze. The investors looked at each other, unsure if they were supposed to laugh as well. Outside, through the glass walls, employees stopped what they were doing. Lila dropped her phone. Ethan from finance took off his glasses and cleaned the lenses 3 times, as if he did not trust what he was seeing. Ryan, the intern, whispered far too loudly, "Everyone, Mr. Carter is laughing. Is this real? Is someone recording this?" Claire stood there holding the tray like a shield, torn between irrational pride and absolute terror. Alexander finally controlled himself, wiping his eyes, his breathing still unsteady. "Sorry," he said to the investors, who were now looking at him with anthropological fascination. "My assistant has a unique talent for perfect timing." The leader of the Japanese group, an older man with glasses and a serious expression, suddenly smiled. "Honesty about mistakes is a sign of wisdom," he said in careful English. "Your assistant understands this." Claire blinked. She had just impressed international investors by accident. "I'll get a cloth," she murmured, slowly stepping back. "Leave it," Alexander said, still with traces of a smile on his face. Just sit there." He pointed to an empty chair in the corner. Claire obeyed, placing the tray on the side table and sitting with as much dignity as someone who had just spilled coffee on a $20,000 carpet could have. The presentation continued, but something had changed. Alexander was more relaxed. His gestures were less mechanical, and twice, when he made a subtle joke about market data, Claire saw the faint return of that smile. When the investors finally left, approving the project to everyone's shock, Alexander stayed in the room with Claire. "You have a gift. For disasters. For timing." He looked at the stain on the carpet. "This carpet is 15 years old. It came from an auction house in London. It survived 3 office moves, and you defeated it with a cup of coffee. Impressive, actually." Claire studied him. There was something different on his face, a softness that had not been there before. "You laughed," she said gently. Alexander's expression changed. The softness disappeared, replaced by something more guarded. It was instinct. It sounded real. He did not answer right away. He simply looked out the window, his fingers tapping on the arm of the chair. "It has been a long time," he finally said, so quietly Claire almost did not hear it. Since something was genuinely funny, he looked at her, and there was something vulnerable in his eyes, something he immediately tried to hide. "Thank you," or "I'm sorry." I'm not sure what the correct response is when an assistant destroys valuable property but makes you laugh for the first time in 2 years. 2 years. Claire felt something tighten in her chest. You're welcome, she offered. Oh, sorry. I also don't know the correct response. He almost smiled again. Then the door opened. Laura walked in with the confidence of someone who belonged in that space, her heels echoing. She stopped when she saw them. Alexander with a lighter expression. Claire still holding the tray, the obvious stain on the floor. What happened here? She asked. But her tone made it clear she was not really asking about the coffee. Small accident, Alexander said, already returning to his professional tone. I saw it from my office. Laura looked at Claire with something dangerous in her eyes. I also saw you laughing. It was not a casual comment. It was an accusation. Alexander Stefanet. The meeting was successful. The investors approved. Good. Laura moved closer, placing a folder on the table. We need to discuss the brand campaign alone. It was a command disguised as a request. Claire stood up. I'll take care of the cleaning. She left quickly, but not before seeing Laura turn to Alexander with an expression that mixed ownership and something darker. Outside, the buzz was overwhelming. He laughed. Lila was telling a group of 5 people, "Did you see that?" He really laughed. First time in how long? Ethan asked. Years, Ryan whispered dramatically. Since the accident, Claire stopped in front of her desk, looking at the closed office door through the glass. Inside, she saw Laura speaking with energy, her hands gesturing. Alexander only listened, his expression back to the carefully constructed neutral one. The smile had disappeared completely, as if it had never existed, and Claire realized something that made her feel strangely sad. Alexander Carter had forgotten what it felt like to laugh until that moment, and someone was very, very bothered by it. Laura Vance did not reach the top of the public relations division at Carter Global by being kind. She got there by being strategic, relentless, and absolutely brilliant at identifying threats before they became problems. And at that moment, looking through her glass office window at the desk where Claire Mitchell was struggling to understand how an electric stapler worked, Laura saw a major threat. Alexander had laughed. For the first time since the accident that had pushed everyone away, including her, Alexander had laughed because of a clumsy barista who talked to inanimate objects. Unacceptably. Laura picked up the internal phone and dialed 3 numbers in sequence. 15 minutes later, she was sitting in the board meeting room with 3 of the company's most influential directors. She's a distraction, Laura said, placing a folder on the table. In 3 days, she caused 2 public incidents, delayed an important meeting, and destroyed a priceless Persian rug. Robert Kane, the chief financial officer, frowned. Eleanor Carter personally hired her. With all due respect to Mrs. Carter, Laura said with a diplomatic smile, a mother and a CEO have different priorities. Eleanor see potentiel. We see corporate responsibility. Miss Mitchell has no qualifications, no experience, and is creating a work environment that is unstable. Unstable? How? Asked Pamela Ruiz, Chief Operating Officer. Laura leaned forward. Alexander is different, more distracted. She makes him laugh in the middle of presentations. This affects his leadership image. Investors need stability, not entertainment. It was not completely a lie, but it was not completely the truth either. And Laura was an expert at using strategic versions of reality. What do you suggest? Robert asked. Transfer, perhaps to another department. Or place her back in her previous position, something that minimizes direct contact with the CEO. The directors exchanged glances. We'll monitor the situation, Pamela finally said. But you make valid points, Laura. That was all she needed. Claire was having a serious argument with the elevator. Look, she said to the polished steel doors. I know you don't like me. That's fine. I don't like you either. You're claustrophobic, and make that strange noise on the 12th floor. That sounds like you're judging me. The door stayed closed. She pressed the button again. Please. I need to deliver these documents to the 23rd floor. If I take the stairs, I'll get there when it's already night. The elevator continued its silent strike. Big deal, you metal box, Claire muttered. You're not even that special. I bet you don't even have decent Wi-Fi. The doors finally opened, and inside was Alexander Carter, looking at her with a mix of amusement and resignation. You were arguing with the elevator. Claire froze, her face immediately red. I was testing the acoustics for security purposes. Very important. Security purposes. Absolutely. She stepped inside, pressing herself against the opposite wall as if it would make her invisible, and you heard nothing. Selective hearing, great executive skill. The doors closed. The silence was so thick, Claire could hear her own heartbeat. 23rd floor? Alexander asked. Yes. He pressed the button. The elevator began to rise. And Claire silently prayed for a quick trip. Of course, the universe had other plans. The elevator stopped abruptly between the 14th and 15th floors. The lights flickered. No, Claire whispered. No, 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 no. Elevator. We were starting to get along. Don't do this. Alexander picked up the internal phone. This is Carter. We're stuck in elevator D. A crackling voice replied. Maintenance on the way. Mr. Carter, 5 to 10 minutes. He hung up. Claire looked up at the ceiling, arms crossed. I knew it. You're vindictive. She pointed at the buttons. This is because I called you a metal box. Is that it? Too sensitive for modern technology. Alexander watched with clear fascination. You truly talk to everything. Only when I'm nervous or bored or awake. She turned to him. I'm sorry. I know you're trying to avoid me. He frowned. What? The last 2 days, you leave rooms when I enter, you cancel meetings where I'd be present. You ask other people to give me instructions. Claire shrugged. You don't need to be subtle. If you want me to leave, just say so. Alexander was silent for a long moment. I'm not trying to avoid you. Then you're doing a poor job pretending I don't exist. He paused, clearly uncomfortable. Laura made some comments about your suitability for the position. Claire felt something tighten in her chest. Oh, I see. And she's not entirely wrong. You have no experience. You're chaotic. Thank you for the brutal honesty. But he continued, and there was something different in his voice. My mother is rarely wrong about people, and you're different. Different in a bad way or a good way. Alexander looked at her directly. I'm still deciding. The elevator chose that moment to shake slightly. Claire held onto his wheelchair. All right, now it's just being dramatic. You're afraid of elevators. I'm afraid of metal boxes hanging from cables over 30 floors of free fall. Yes, it's called survival instinct. It's called anxiety. Alexander found himself letting out something that almost sounded like a quiet laugh. Have you always been like this? Like what? Saying everything you think. Claire considered the question. My mother said I came into the world already narrating. The nurse asked if I was all right. And apparently I answered, all good here. Just processing the existential trauma of leaving a warm and comfortable place. I was 20 seconds old. This time Alexander truly laughed. It was soft, almost reluctant, but it was real. You made that up. Maybe. Claire smiled. But it made you laugh, so it was worth it. The elevator shook again, and the lights flickered before steadying. Alexander watched her with an expression she could not read. Why do you do that? Make up stories? Try to make me laugh. Claire grew serious. Because you seem like someone who forgot how, and that's sad. She leaned against the wall, and because when you laugh, your whole face changes. You look human, not the intimidating CEO, just Alexander. His name sounded different coming from her softer, more sincere. He looked at his hands, fingers interlaced. Laura said I'm different when you're around. And is that bad? She thinks it's a distraction. And you? What do you think? Alexander lifted his eyes. And there was something vulnerable there, something he rarely showed. I think he paused. I think I didn't mind being distracted until someone pointed it out. The elevator finally came back to life with a jolt. The doors opened on the 15th floor, where 2 maintenance technicians waited with tools. Sorry for the delay, Mr. Carter. One of them said. Alexander simply nodded and left, Claire following. But before they entered the next elevator, he turned. Miss Mitchell. Yes? Keep being you. No matter what Laura or anyone else says. And then he stepped into the elevator, leaving Claire standing there processing. All right, Claire, she murmured. What just happened? He basically said he wants you around, or are you reading too much into it? Probably reading too much into it. Definitely reading too much into it. But when she finally stepped into the next elevator, she was smiling, and she did not see Laura watching from a distance, phone in hand, eyes cold as ice. The war had only begun. Claire was not supposed to be there. It was 8:15 at night. The building was almost empty, and she definitely should not be wandering alone on the empty 35th floor at night. But she had forgotten a folder in Alexander's office, and technically, she was still an employee. So technically, it was not trespassing. Technically. All right, Claire, she murmured. Walking down the quiet hallway. Get the folder. Leave fast. No one needs to know you're still here after hours like an amateur corporate spy. The 35th floor hallway looked different at night. No employee chatter, no phones ringing, only the low hum of the air conditioning and her own soft footsteps on the carpet. She had walked through that private area dozens of times during the day, but she had never seen that door at the end open. She was almost at Alexander's office when she heard it. Sounds heavy breathing, a muffled sound of effort, and music, something instrumental and motivational that sounded like a dramatic movie soundtrack. Claire stopped. The sounds came from the door at the end of the hallway, a door she had never seen open. Curiosity had always been her weakness. Just a quick look, she whispered. Quick, scientific, completely appropriate. She approached slowly, and through the small frosted glass window on the door, she saw lights on, and then she saw him. Alexander was on parallel bars, his hands gripping the metal bars as he tried to take a step. Sweat ran down his face. The muscles in his arms trembled with effort, and beside him, a strong physical therapist in a blue polo shirt gave instructions. One more. Mr. Carter, you can do it. Alexander muttered something that was probably not appropriate for corporate environments, but he took the step. His right leg moved a few inches. Claire held her breath. She did not know. No one knew. Alexander did physical therapy at night in secret, fighting to regain something the accident had taken from him. One more, the therapist said. I cannot. You can do it. Thomas, I swear if you say one more time that I can. Alexander closed his eyes, took a deep breath, and tried again. And Claire, without thinking, without a filter, without any control over her mouth, murmured, Come on, right leg. That's it. You can do it. The door was slightly open. Her voice echoed. Alexander and Thomas turned at the same time. Panic flooded Claire completely. He didn't. Open door. Accident. Folder. Science. None of those words made sense, not even together. Alexander stared at her, his breathing still heavy, his hand still holding the bars. Miss Mitchell, he said, his voice dangerously calm. What are you doing here? I forgot a folder. She lifted her empty hands, which is clearly not here because I'm in the wrong place. I'll leave now. Goodbye. Stop. It was not a request. Claire froze. Come back. She slowly obeyed, stepping into what was clearly a private physical therapy room. Medical equipment, treadmills, parallel bars, mirrors covering an entire wall. Thomas helped Alexander sit back in the wheelchair, handing him a towel. I'll get water, he said, giving Alexander a meaningful look before leaving. The silence was overwhelming. How much did you see? Alexander finally asked. Enough to know you're much stronger than you let people believe. He wiped his face with the towel. And now you're going to tell the entire company that the CEO needs help to take 3 steps. What? No. Claire moved closer. Alexander, this is incredible. You're fighting, working. You didn't give up. There's nothing incredible about 2 years of physical therapy just to move a leg a few inches. Yes, there is. She sat on a nearby bench. Because you didn't stop. You could have accepted the chair, stayed comfortable, but you didn't. Alexander watched her with an expression she could not read. Why are you really here? Folder. Remember a lie. You didn't even look toward the office. Claire exhaled. All right. I saw the light. I was curious. I'm a terrible person who spies on the boss. You can sue me. I should. But you won't. Why not? Because you're almost smiling. And he was small, reluctant, but it was there. Thomas returned with 2 bottles of water and handed one to Alexander. Are we done for today? He asked. Alexander looked at Claire, then back at Thomas. One more set. Sir, one more. Thomas. The therapist sighed but helped Alexander back to the parallel bars. And Claire, because apparently she had completely lost her ability to use good judgment, said, Do you need cheering? Alexander paused. What cheering? Encouragement. Those motivational shouts you hear in sports movies. I can do that. Absolutely not. Come on, Alexander, she shouted, ignoring him entirely. You can do it. Right leg. You look wonderful today. Chair. Don't embarrass him now. Thomas let out a short laugh. Alexander looked up at the ceiling, clearly questioning every life decision he had ever made. Miss Mitchell. Yes. Movement small, but quality over quantity. Claire was standing now, gesturing dramatically. Left leg, don't be jealous. Your moment will come. I dislike you. Alexander murmured, but there was a smile on his lips. That's not true. You enjoy this. Thomas, is he smiling? Does that count as a double victory? Definitely, Thomas confirmed, clearly entertained. Alexander took another step, then another, and when he finally stopped, his breathing heavy but his eyes shining with something that looked like pride, Claire clapped as if he had just won an Olympic medal. Champion. Someone play Eye of the Tiger. This man is a legend. Alexander laughed a real laugh. Loud, and the sound filled the room like light. When Thomas finally helped him back into the chair, Alexander looked at Claire with an expression she had not seen before. Gratitude. Thank you, he said softly, for shouting embarrassing things, for not feeling sorry for me. Claire sat beside him. Why would I feel sorry? You're literally fighting to walk again. That's not sad, it's heroic. No one else sees it that way. Then no one else is paying attention. Thomas was putting equipment away, pretending not to listen, but Claire saw the small smile. Alexander was silent for a moment. Come tomorrow, he said suddenly. What? At 8 physical therapy session, he looked straight at her. If you're going to discover my secrets, you can at least be useful as, what did you call it? Cheering. Claire blinked. You're inviting me to watch your physical therapy. I already regret it. I'll bring pom-poms. Please don't bring pom-poms. I'll make a banner something like, Go Alexander with glitter. Claire. It was the first time he called her by her first name. She smiled. No pom-poms, no banner, just me being annoying as always. Perfect, he said, and he sounded sincere. When Claire finally left without the folder, she never went back, for Alexander remained looking at the closed door. She's different, Thomas commented. That's a polite way to say it. She made you laugh during physical therapy. Thomas shook his head. In 2 years, no one has managed to do that. Alexander did not respond, but that night, for the first time in a long while, he left the session smiling, and for the first time, he did not feel alone in the fight. The dress was a problem not because it was ugly. In fact, it was beautiful. An elegant navy blue that Eleanor Carter had personally sent to Claire's apartment with a note. Wear this. Do not argue. Eck. The problem was that Claire had never worn anything that cost more than 3 months of rent, and she was absolutely terrified of breathing wrong and tearing it. Okay, Claire, she murmured to the mirror, fixing her hair for the 10th time. Don't spill anything, not champagne, not food, not him, especially not him. The annual Carter Global Charity Dinner was legendary. Billionaires, celebrities, politicians all gathered at the Plaza Hotel to donate money and pretend they liked one another, and Claire was going to be there as Alexander's social assistant, whatever that meant. A black limousine picked her up at 6 sharp. Inside, Alexander was already waiting impeccable in a black tuxedo, his hair perfectly styled, looking out the window with a distant expression. When Claire got in, he turned and paused for 3 full seconds. He simply looked at her. I know, Claire rushed to say, sitting awkwardly. I look like someone dressed up as a fancy person. Your mother has expensive taste. I promise not to ruin the dress. You look beautiful, Alexander said, and he sounded surprised by his own words. Claire felt her face warm. Thank you. You look, as well, with the tux very James Bond. Fewer explosions, more spreadsheets. But still, he smiled that small smile she was beginning to recognize. The limousine slid through the streets of Manhattan, and Claire tried not to look like a fascinated tourist staring out the window. Nervous? Alexander asked, terrified. I'll be surrounded by people who probably have more money in their wallets than I make in a year. And I have to pretend I know how to use formal dinner silverware. How many forks do you even need to eat a salad? 4, 7, 3. See? I'm already wrong. Claire, he said, and there was something gentle in his voice. You'll be fine. Just be yourself. That's either comforting or frightening. I'm not sure. When they arrived at the plaza, a wave of flashes went off. Photographers calling names, reporters waving microphones. Is this normal? Claire whispered as Alexander got out of the limousine. Unfortunately, he extended his hand. Claire looked at it, then at him. You want me to help you get out? I want you to walk in with me as my companion. But you're in a wheelchair, I noticed. So technically, I should be pushing you. Please don't push me. These chairs cost $20,000. $20,000? Claire almost shouted. For a chair? Does it have GPS? Does it make coffee? Alexander laughed, and several photographers captured the moment. Inside, the ballroom was decorated like something out of a millionaire fairy tale. Crystal chandeliers, tables with white silk linens, floral arrangements that probably cost more than a used car. Eleanor appeared immediately, stunning in a silver evening gown. Claire, dear, you look perfect. She kissed both of Claire's cheeks. Alexander, close your mouth. You're drooling. Mother, Alexander warned, just motherly observations. Eleanor winked at Claire. Enjoy yourselves. And Alexander's smile. You're being photographed." She vanished in a cloud of expensive perfume and confidence. The evening began relatively well. Claire managed not to spill champagne, not to trip, and not to say anything terribly embarrassing for 45 minutes. Then she saw Laura. Laura Vance entered the ballroom like a vengeful apparition, wearing a red gown that looked like liquid fire. Each step calculated for maximum effect. She walked straight to Alexander. "Alexander, darling, you look radiant." Her gaze slid to Claire. "And you brought company. How unexpected." "Laura," Alexander said neutrally, "we need to discuss the speech. There are a few last-minute changes." She touched his arm with a sense of ownership. "In private, I'm fine right here," Alexander replied. Laura smiled, but there was ice in that smile. "Of course." She walked away, but Claire saw something in her eyes. Revenge. Dinner was served, 5 courses that Claire could barely identify, much less eat correctly. She used the wrong fork twice, dropped crumbs on her lap, and accidentally called caviar expensive fish eggs. Alexander thought it was hilarious. Then it was time for the speech. Alexander was announced, and the entire room turned toward the small stage in the center. He was positioned in front of the microphone, holding note cards. "Good evening," he began. "Thank you for." The microphone screeched, then died completely. Silence. Alexander tested it again. Nothing. Across the room, Claire saw Laura adjusting something at a technical control table, a tiny smile on her lips. She had sabotaged the microphone. Alexander tried to continue without amplification, but 400 people in a large ballroom could not hear him. And Claire, without thinking, without planning, simply stood up. He said, "Thank you for being here." She shouted from the back of the room. Every head turned. Alexander looked at her, surprised. "Claire, sorry," she said, "Keter. I was just translating." "Keep going," someone shouted. Eleanor from her table nodded encouragingly. Alexander looked at Claire, then at his notes, and clearly decided to take the risk. He spoke, and Claire, heaven help her, repeated it loudly. "This foundation represents hope," Alexander said. "This foundation represents hope, and also a lot of your money, but mainly hope," Claire added. Laughter spread across the room. Alexander almost smiled. "Together we can make a difference," he continued. "Together we can make a difference," Claire repeated. "And separately too. But together is more efficient. Teamwork." More laughter. Alexander was clearly trying not to laugh as he gave his speech, and Claire improvised more and more absurd translations. "Thank you for your continued support. Thank you for your continued support and for your donations, which are very generous. Your accountants will enjoy the tax deduction." The entire room was laughing now, even Alexander. When he finished, the applause was thunderous, and while everyone clapped, Claire saw Laura in the corner. Fists clenched, eyes burning. Alexander stepped off the stage and went straight to Claire. "You saved my speech. Technically, I ruined your speech, but with good intention, Claire," he said. "Serious now? Thank you. No one else would have done that. Of course they would. You just need people who aren't afraid to look ridiculous." He held her hand brief, gentle, but the touch sent a surge of electricity up Claire's arm. "You're never afraid to look ridiculous," he said. "It's my superpower." Across the room, Laura watched, and Claire realized something that made her swallow hard. The war had just escalated. The silence was overwhelming. Alexander noticed it at 9:15 Monday morning when he wheeled past Claire's desk and heard absolutely nothing. "No, okay, Claire, you can do this. No, come on, computer work with me today." No one-sided conversation with the printer about its self-destructive tendencies, just silence. Claire was sitting perfectly straight, typing with robotic efficiency, her eyes fixed on the screen as if she were in a staring contest. Alexander stopped. "Good morning, Miss Mitchell." "Good morning, Mr. Carter," she replied without looking up, formal, cool, completely different. He waited. He waited for her to say something about the elevator making a strange sound, or about her coffee being too hot, or about anything random she usually narrated. Nothing. "I need the third quarter reports by noon," he said, testing. "Yes, sir. They're already in your inbox." "Oh, good." He hesitated. "Are you well?" "Perfectly well, Mr. Carter." And then she returned to typing, efficient and silent, like a well-oiled machine. Alexander entered his office, closed the door, and felt something unusual in his chest. Worry, curiosity, confusion, longing. At 10:30, Lila from marketing walked past Claire's desk. "Hey, Claire, did you see where I left that file?" She stopped, looking around. Where's the sarcastic comment? The internal narration? The, "Okay, Lila, breathe"? The file is in the blue folder. Claire smiled politely. Third drawer on the left blue folder. Thank you. Lila stared at her as if she were an alien. Are you okay? Perfectly. Lila backed away slowly, clearly disturbed. At noon, Ethan from finance tripped near the coffee station, dropping 3 spoons on the floor. Normally, Claire would have murmured something like, "The spoons are rebelling. Ethan, be careful." But she simply kept walking silent, with a perfectly balanced cup of tea. Ethan looked at the spoons on the floor as if they had lost all meaning. At 2:00 the afternoon, the elevator made that strange noise again, the metallic squeak between the 12th and 13th floors that always made Claire comment about the machine's troubled soul. 3 people in the elevator waited. Claire remained silent, looking at the ceiling as if she were meditating. Ryan, the intern, whispered to a coworker, "Is she all right? Should someone check if she's still breathing?" Alexander called Claire for a meeting at 3. She walked in with a tablet and pen, sat down, and waited in professional silence. "We need to review next week's schedule," he said. "Of course, Tuesday meeting with investors at 9. Noted. Wednesday lunch with the board. Noted. Thursday results presentation. Noted. Alexander paused. You're not going to say anything about Thursdays being cursed or that presentations should be illegal before coffee?" Claire looked up, confused. "Why would I say that, Mr. Carter?" "Because you always say these things. I decided to be more professional." "Why?" She hesitated, and for the first time he saw something pass through her eyes. Pain quick, but it was there. "Because I was informed that my behavior is inappropriate for a corporate environment." Her voice was perfectly controlled, "so I'm adjusting." Alexander felt anger rise. "Who told you that?" "It doesn't matter." She stood up. "If you don't need anything else, I have reports to organize. Claire, Miss Mitchell, please." And she left, leaving Alexander staring at the closed door. Laura showed up at 4. "I see your assistant finally learned corporate etiquette," she said, sitting in the chair in front of Alexander's desk without being invited. "It was you," he said. "It was not a question. I simply had a conversation with her, woman to woman. I explained that her peculiar behavior was reflecting poorly on you." Laura smiled. She understood. Smart young women understand when they're out of their place. Alexander stared at her. "Get out of my office, Laura. Now." Laura stood, but there was triumph in her eyes. "I'm only protecting you as I always have." When she left, Alexander turned his wheelchair toward the window. The building looked different. Emptier. Colder. Strange how the world had gone silent without her. At 6:00 the evening, Claire was packing her things to go home. The printer made a sound, the same annoying sound it always made when it was about to jam. She looked at the machine. The printer made the sound again, as if provoking her. Claire opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again, but said nothing. She simply grabbed her bag and left. In the empty elevator going down alone, she finally whispered, "Okay, Claire, you did it." A full day, silent, professional, completely miserable. The doors opened on the ground floor. She walked out, and the building seemed to sigh with relief when her presence disappeared. That night, Alexander stayed late at the office. He would not admit he was waiting for Claire to show up with some excuse about a forgotten folder, waiting to hear her voice narrating something absurd in the hallway, but the building remained silent. At 8, he went to the physical therapy room. Thomas was preparing equipment. "Where's your cheering section?" he asked. Alexander did not answer. The session was mechanical, efficient, joyless. When he took 3 steps, his best performance in weeks, there was no applause, no absurd narration about heroic legs, only silence. "Good work," Thomas said professionally. "Thank you," Alexander replied empty. The next morning, Claire arrived at 8 sharp, hair in a perfect bun, impeccable clothes, neutral expression. She greeted Alexander with a polite nod and returned to her desk and did not say a word the entire day. Lila tried to make conversation at lunch. "So, interesting weekend?" It was adequate. Adequate? Who answers with adequate? Claire only smiled politely and went back to eating her salad in silence. On the 3rd day of silence, something broke. Alexander was in a particularly tedious meeting with the legal department when he realized he was looking for Claire. He looking for some absurd comment, some observation that would make that torture bearable. But she was sitting in the corner taking perfect notes in absolute silence, and he realized something that hit him like a punch. He had grown used to her chaos, had grown used to the narrations, the improvised comments, the charming disorder she brought into every room. She was not the distraction, she was the only thing that made that place bearable. That night, Alexander called her into his office. "You may close the door," he said. Claire obeyed, waiting while standing, hands professionally clasped. "Sit." She sat. Alexander studied her. The tension around her mouth. The eyes that no longer shined. "Laura spoke to you," he said. "Yes." "What exactly did she say?" "That my behavior was inappropriate, that I was damaging your image, that I should act like a real professional or leave." Claire spoke without emotion, as if she were reading a weather report. Alexander felt anger rising. "And you believed her?" "She wasn't wrong. She was completely wrong." Claire finally looked at him, and there was pain in her eyes. "Alexander, I spilled coffee on $20,000 carpets. I compared you to a penguin in an executive meeting. I shouted absurd translations at a charity dinner." Her voice trembled slightly. "Maybe she's right. Maybe I don't belong here." "Stop. It's true. Claire Mitchell, do you hear me?" Alexander leaned forward. "I spent 2 years in this building surrounded by people who were impeccable, efficient, and completely empty. And then you showed up talking to elevators and narrating disasters, and for the first time in years, I remembered what it was like to feel alive." She blinked, surprised. "You what?" "Don't change," he said firmly. "Don't let Laura or anyone else erase who you are." Tears formed in Claire's eyes. "But what if I'm not good enough?" "You're exactly good enough." He paused. "You're perfect." The silence that followed was different, heavy, full of unspoken things. Then Claire whispered, "All right. Claire, don't cry in the CEO's office. That's definitely not professional." And Alexander laughed. The summons arrived by email at 10:00 the morning. Subject: Urgent meeting. Conference room B. 10:30. From Laura Vance, Director of Public Relations. Claire looked at the screen, her stomach sinking. "All right. This cannot be good," she murmured. "Urgent meeting with Laura. It can be anything but good. Termination. Probably termination. She'll fire me in a conference room with a panoramic view, because even that has to be dramatic." Lila walked past her desk. "You got the email too? You were called?" "No, but the whole building is talking." "Laura called only you." Lila made a face. "Good luck. You'll need it." At 10:30, Claire knocked on the conference room door. "Come in." Laura's voice was cold, even through the wood. Claire opened the door. Laura was seated at the head of the table, perfectly composed in a spotless white suit, her fingers interlaced over a folder. "Sit down, Miss Mitchell." It was not an invitation. Claire sat, her hands sweating. "I'll be direct." Laura began without preamble. "You don't belong here." I'm sorry. You heard me clearly." Laura leaned forward. "This company has standards, a reputation. And you're a barista who somehow fooled Eleanor Carter and charmed Alexander with your lost little girl act." Claire felt anger rising. "I didn't fool anyone, and I definitely didn't. Please." Laura laughed. But there was no humor. "I see the way you look at him, how he's changed since you arrived. He smiles, he laughs, he's distracted, and all of that is because of you, and that is bad. It's disastrous. Alexander needs focus. He needs someone who understands this world, someone who can truly help him." Laura paused. "Someone like me." The truth finally clicked. "You still have feelings for him," Claire said softly. Laura's face hardened. "What I feel is irrelevant. What matters is what's best for him and for this company. And you, Miss Mitchell, are not—" She pushed a piece of paper across the table. "This is a resignation letter. Sign it. I'll ensure 3 months of salary as compensation." Claire looked at the paper. "And if I don't sign? Then I'll make your life here impossible." Laura smiled coldly. "I believe I've already shown I'm capable of that." Claire picked up the pen, looked at the signature line, and then something inside her broke, not sadness, not defeat, anger. "You know what?" she said, setting the pen down. "No." Laura blinked. "I'm sorry?" "No, I'm not signing." Claire stood. "Do you know what I realized? You're not worried about Alexander. You're worried about yourself. You feel threatened because for the first time in years he's happy, and it's not because of you. How dare you? And you know what else?" Claire continued, her voice rising. "I didn't fool anyone. I work hard. Do I make mistakes? Yes. Do I talk to myself? Also, yes. But I care truly about him, about this job. And I won't let you intimidate me into leaving because you can't handle the fact that Alexander moved on. Laura stood, her eyes flashing. Leave now. With pleasure. Claire left, slamming the door, and went straight to the elevator. The elevator was full. 8 people, including Ethan from finance, Ryan the intern, and 2 women from HR. Claire stepped in, pressed the button for the 35th floor, and tried to breathe. Okay, Claire, she whispered to herself. You survived. You didn't sign. You'll probably be fired anyway, but at least you kept your dignity about 20% of it. Maybe 15%. The elevator began to go up. Laura Vance is impossible, she continued, not noticing she was speaking louder. I mean, I understand that she's powerful and beautiful and probably wakes up looking perfect, but does she have to be so mean? Ryan suggested from the corner. Claire jumped. I was talking to myself loudly, Ethan added, very loudly. Oh no. Claire covered her face. I did it again, didn't I? Go on. One of the HR women said. It was getting interesting. The elevator stopped on the 12th floor. 3 people entered. 11 people now. Claire tried to stay quiet. It lasted 15 seconds. And another thing, she burst out. She sabotaged the microphone at the charity dinner. I saw it. She was at the control table, and the microphone suddenly went silent. And she had that smile like, mission accomplished. Who does that at a charity event? For sick people? The elevator was completely silent. Everyone was looking at her, and she told me to stop talking to myself, Claire continued, words flowing out uncontrollably. She said I was embarrassing Alexander, that I didn't belong here, that I should sign a resignation letter. But do you know what I think? I think she's jealous because Alexander is happy, and she can't control that. The elevator stopped on the 20th floor. 2 more people entered it. Oh, this is good, one of them said. Continue. And do you know the worst part? Claire was on a roll now, unstoppable. She thinks she's protecting him, but she's only protecting herself because she hasn't moved on from the breakup. And instead of living her life, she's sabotaging anyone who makes Alexander smile. The elevator stopped on the 23rd floor. Laura Vance entered. The silence was instant and deadly. 13 pairs of eyes moved between Laura and Claire like a tennis match. Laura looked around, sensing something was wrong. What's going on here? No one answered. Then Ryan, blessed Ryan, whispered far too loudly. She just narrated a scandal in real time. Laura turned slowly to Claire. Claire swallowed. Technically, I was talking to myself. It's a medical condition. Lack of filter. Genetic, probably. You just accused me of sabotage in front of 13 witnesses. Ethan added helpfully. I'm not speaking to you. Laura nearly shouted. The elevator stopped on the 35th floor. The doors opened, and there was Alexander waiting to step in. He looked at the crowded elevator, at Laura's red face, at Claire looking like she wanted to disappear, and at the 13 clearly fascinated witnesses. Would someone like to explain? He asked calmly. Silence. Then Lila, who had just arrived in the hallway, said, Claire exposed Laura for sabotaging your microphone at the charity dinner and trying to force her to resign. In the elevator, Ryan added, with 13 witnesses, Ethan concluded. Alexander looked at Laura. Is that true? Alexander. Let me explain. Is it true? He repeated. Colder. Laura opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. Then she simply left the elevator, her heels echoing as she disappeared down the hallway. Alexander stepped into the elevator and pressed the emergency stop button. Everyone out now. 13 people exited at record speed. The doors closed, leaving only Alexander and Claire. You exposed the director of public relations in an elevator with witnesses, he said. Technically, it was an accident. I was processing verbally. Claire looked at her shoes. You're going to fire me, aren't you? Fire you? Alexander laughed. Claire, you just did something executives pay lawyers to do. You exposed corporate misconduct with witnesses, so I'm not fired? You're being promoted? Claire lifted her head, shocked. What? Anyone brave enough to narrate a scandal in real time in a crowded elevator deserves more than executive assistant. He smiled. Besides, I need someone honest at my side. Apparently, you can't lie, even if you try. Is that a character flaw? It's your greatest strength. The elevator was still stopped, suspended between floors, and Claire realized they were very close. Thank you, she whispered, for believing in me. Always, he replied, and when the doors finally opened on the 35th floor, 13 employees were still there, clearly waiting to see the outcome. Back to work. Alexander stepped out first. The show is over. But as they dispersed, Claire heard the whispers. She's a legend. Better entertainment than cable TV. Someone should record these things. And for the first time in days, Claire gave a real smile. Laura Vance might have had power, but Claire Mitchell had something better. The truth and a full elevator of witnesses. The press conference was scheduled for 2:00 the afternoon. It was the most important one of the year. Announcement of international expansion, new billion-dollar contracts, and the public presentation of Alexander Carter as a fully recovered CEO back in control. 200 journalists, 20 cameras, live broadcast for global investors, and Laura Vance had full access to the technical systems. Claire sensed trouble before it even began. She was backstage in the corporate auditorium, watching Laura walk around the sound equipment with a tablet in hand and a very small smile on her lips. "Okay, Claire, breathe," she murmured. "It could be paranoia. Maybe she's just checking things professionally with no harmful intentions." Laura looked directly at Claire through the glass and blinked. Definitely harmful intentions. Alexander entered backstage, impeccable in a navy suit. The speech printed in a leather folder. "Ready?" he asked Claire. "I should be asking you that. I've been giving speeches since I was 20. But his fingers tapped nervously on the folder. "It's just another one. It's the most important one," Claire corrected. "And you'll do great as always." He smiled that small smile she had learned to recognize as genuine. "Are you going to watch?" From the front row with mental pom-poms. No mental pom-poms. Too late. I'm already waving them. Eleanor appeared, stunning in a cream-colored suit. "Alexander, dear, it's time." She fixed his tie with motherly hands. "And Claire, you stay beside the stage. He likes to know you're there." "Mother," Alexander warned, but he was blushing. "What?" "Just factual observations." The opening music began. The auditorium lights dimmed. Alexander took a deep breath and went onto the stage. The auditorium exploded in applause. He positioned the chair behind the podium, the microphone adjusted at the perfect height, and began, "Good afternoon. Thank you for being here for this historic moment at Carter Global." The microphone died completely absolute digital silence. Alexander paused, tested the microphone. Nothing. Backstage, Laura watched with satisfaction as technicians rushed around desperately trying to fix it. "Technical issue," someone shouted. 3 minutes. But 3 minutes in a live broadcast was an eternity. Cameras filming, journalists whispering, investors waiting. Alexander tried to continue without amplification, but 200 people in a large auditorium could not hear him. Frustration crossed his face, and Claire saw it. She saw the moment he began to close up, to rebuild those walls he had spent months taking down. No, she would not let that happen. Without thinking, without planning, Claire simply walked onto the stage. 200 heads turned. Alexander looked at her, surprised. "Claire, what are you?" She took his lapel microphone, which was still working. Only the podium system had been sabotaged and clipped it onto her own clothes. "Continue," she told him. "I'll translate." "You'll what?" "Trust me." For 3 seconds, he hesitated, then nodded. Alexander spoke, his voice reaching only Claire, and Claire, with the lapel microphone amplifying perfectly, said, "Mr. Carter says, thank you for your patience during this technical issue, which honestly is quite embarrassing considering we're a technology company." Laughter around the auditorium. "But we'll continue because we have amazing news." Alexander almost smiled, then continued speaking. Claire translated, "Carter Global is expanding into 3 new international markets." She paused. "He's saying numbers now. A lot of numbers. Impressive ones. I don't understand half of them. But trust me, they're good." More laughter. Alexander was trying to keep a professional posture, but his eyes were shining. He continued the speech, describing contracts and partnerships. Claire translated in her own unique style. "New contracts with a total value of wait. Let me check the papers, $2 billion. She whistled. "That's a lot of money, truly a lot. My brain can't even process all those zeros." The auditorium was laughing now, but also paying full attention. Then Alexander reached the emotional part of the speech, the part about resilience, about not giving up, despite the obstacles. He spoke softly, and Claire listened to every word. "He's saying," she began, her voice softer, "that the last 2 years were the most difficult of his life, that there were moments he wanted to give up, that the wheelchair felt like a sentence, not a tool." The auditorium was completely silent now. "But then," Claire continued, He found people who didn't pity him, who didn't treat him as fragile, who challenged him, who made him remember that strength isn't about standing, it's about continuing to fight, no matter how. Alexander watched her, and there was something intense in his eyes. "And he wants to thank," Claire said, her voice trembling slightly, "the person who showed up, talking to herself, spilling coffee, and accidentally reminding him that imperfection is human, and humanity is what makes all this." She gestured to the stage, the audience, the company meaningful, complete silence, then applause, thunderous, a standing ovation, the entire auditorium. Alexander did not take his eyes off Claire. She handed the microphone back, whispering, "Sorry if I ruined your speech. You saved it," he replied again. They walked off stage together while the applause continued, and backstage, Laura was pale, the tablet shaking in her hands. Eleanor intercepted Claire, her eyes shining with held-back tears. "Dear, you're extraordinary. I just improvised. You did much more than that." Eleanor looked toward Alexander, who was now surrounded by executives and journalists. "You brought him back." But as the excitement continued, Claire felt something shifting. All those people wanting to talk to Alexander, all those cameras, all that attention, and she, the former barista who talked to elevators, suddenly very aware that she did not belong in that world. "Miss Mitchell," a journalist approached, "can you comment on your relationship with Mr. Carter? I'm his assistant." It looked like more than that on stage. More journalists approaching, more cameras. "Are you together? For how long? Does this affect corporate decisions?" Panic rose in Claire's throat. "I need to excuse me." She left, walking quickly through the hallways, ignoring the voices calling her name. She entered the empty elevator, pressed the button for the lobby, and finally allowed the tears to come. "Okay, Claire," she whispered, "you crossed the line. That speech was too personal. You shared too much. And now everyone thinks you and Alexander are the elevator." Stopped on the 12th floor. Laura stepped in. They stayed silent for one entire floor. Then Laura said in a cold voice, "Happy? It wasn't a competition. It always was." Laura stared at her. "And do you know what comes after public victories like this? Scrutiny, media pressure." She smiled, cruel. "Do you think you're ready for that?" A barista who barely knows which fork to use. The doors opened on the lobby. Laura walked out without looking back. And Claire stayed there, the words echoing. She had saved the speech, but she had exposed herself completely in the process. And now she was not sure she could handle the consequences. 3 days later, Claire's desk was empty. No note, no explanation, no warning, only a typed resignation letter left folded on the keyboard. Alexander found it at 7:00 the morning when he arrived at the office. He read it once, then again. "Thank you for the opportunity, but I believe it's time to return to where I belong. CM." And for the first time in years, Alexander Carter felt his heart truly break. 3 months, 92 days, since Claire had left that folded letter and disappeared from Manhattan like smoke. Alexander had tried everything. Calls that went straight to voicemail, emails that returned unread. He even hired a private investigator who only discovered that she had gone back to her hometown, Willowbrook, a small town upstate New York with more cows than people. And every day he looked at the empty desk outside his office and felt the silence like a physical weight. Eleanor finally lost her patience on a Tuesday morning. She entered his office without knocking a mother's privilege and slammed a folder on the desk hard enough to make his coffee shake. "Alexander James Carter. Enough. Mother. I'm in the middle of 3 months of self-destructive misery. I noticed." She crossed her arms. "The company is functioning from her. You're breathing, but you're not living. And we both know why. I don't know what you're talking about. Terrible liar. Always were." Eleanor leaned over the desk. "So go get her, you foolish man." Alexander stared at her. She made it clear she doesn't want. She made it clear she was afraid. "There's a difference." Eleanor softened her voice. "Dear, you spent 2 years hiding behind this desk. Claire brought you back to life, and you're going to let her walk away because it's easier than fighting?" The words hit like a punch. "And if she doesn't want to see me, then you come back alone and at least you'll know you tried." Eleanor picked up her purse. "But something tells me she's there talking to herself, waiting for you to show up." Willowbrook was a 3-hour drive from Manhattan. Alexander rented an adapted SUV. Driving with hand controls had been one of the first things he relearned after the accident, and drove along the highway, while the GPS gave directions in a monotonous voice. The town was exactly as he imagined. Main Street with a hardware store, small market, gas station that also sold fishing bait, the kind of place where everyone knew everyone's. The address the investigator had given him was a small two-story house on the outskirts of town with a white fence and a garden that needed care. Alexander parked in front, his heart beating so hard he could hear it. "Okay," he murmured to himself. "You came all the way here. Don't give up now." He was transferring to the wheelchair when he saw it. A man walked out the front door, tall, muscular, probably 6'3" of pure muscle and good genetics. Dark hair, a t-shirt that showed arms that clearly spent time at the gym, easy smile, and he was carrying suitcases. Claire's suitcases. Alexander felt the world stop. The man placed the suitcases in the trunk of a blue sedan, then went back inside the house laughing at something. And then Claire appeared, hair down, jeans, and a simple t-shirt, laughing too. The man said something. She hit his arm playfully. Alexander could not breathe. She had moved on. Of course she had 3 months. She was beautiful, funny, incredible. Why would she not move on? And he had come all the way here, pathetic and desperate, to do what exactly? But then he saw the man carry one more suitcase, and something inside Alexander broke. He had not come all that way to give up on the sidewalk. Alexander pushed his chair to the front door and rang the bell. Claire opened it and froze. "Alexander." Her voice was pure shock. "What are you? How did you? May I speak with you?" he asked, and he hated how his voice shook. Yes, of course." She stepped out, closing the door behind her. "How did you find me?" "Private investigator. I'm sorry if it seems frightening. It seems desperate. I am desperate." Claire blinked. The man came out of the house at that moment carrying another suitcase. "Claire, this is the last." He stopped when he saw Alexander. "Oh, hi. Hello," Alexander replied, his voice colder than he intended. Awkward silence. Claire looked between the two men as if watching a disaster in slow motion. "Alexander," she began. "This is—" "Look," Alexander interrupted, because if he did not say it now, he never would. "I don't care. What if you moved on? If you found someone? If you're happy here?" He took a deep breath. "I don't care. I mean, I care obviously. I care a lot, but I came all this way because I need you to know something." Claire was very still. "In the last 3 months, I tried to go back to normal, tried to be the old Alexander. Efficient, focused, controlled." He let out a humorless laugh. "And I realized I don't want to be that Alexander. I want to be the Alexander who laughs at bad jokes, who listens to unexpected narration, who has mental cheerleading pom-poms. I want to be the Alexander you reminded me I could be." His voice broke. "And if you found someone else, if you're happy, then I'm happy for you. But I needed you to know that you changed my life, that I love you." Absolute silence. The man stood there with his mouth open. Claire had tears in her eyes. Alexander waited hard in pieces, expecting rejection. Then Claire did something unexpected. She smiled small. "Mischievous. Alexander," she said softly, "this is my brother, Daniel." The world stopped spinning. "Your brother?" She pointed to the muscular man. "Daniel, older brother, firefighter, overly protective, terrible timing." Daniel nodded, clearly trying not to laugh. "And nice to meet you, man. She doesn't stop talking about you alone. All the time. It's driving Sir Paws crazy." Alexander looked at Claire, at Daniel, back at Claire. "Brother," he repeated, stunned. "Brother," Claire confirmed. "So you're not?" "He's not." "Boyfriend?" "No." She stepped closer. "Much too brother for that." "Hey," Danielle protested. "I'm a premium catch. You're muscular and annoying family." "Daniel, I'll let you two talk." He went inside, but not before whispering to Alexander. "She cried watching corporate videos of your company on YouTube. Just so you know." When they were alone, Alexander finally breathed. "You let me think for 3 whole minutes that you had a boyfriend. You deserve to suffer a little." But she was smiling through tears. "You said you love me." "I did, and I'll say it again. I love you completely. Chaotically. Permanently. I love you too." Claire wiped her tears. "But I ran because I was afraid that world, the media, the expectations. I didn't think I was good enough." "You're more than good enough." He held her hand. "You're perfect for me, for that world. For any world. Even when I talk to myself, especially when you talk to myself." Claire laughed the laugh he had missed every second of the past 92 days. "You drove 3 hours to get here. I'd drive 300 in an adapted wheelchair. It's still impressive. It's very impressive." She knelt in front of him. "So what happens now?" "Now?" Alexander smiled. "Now you come back with me, back to Manhattan. Back to me. And if I say I want to stay here," he did not hesitate, "then I stay too." And Claire knew in that moment that he meant it. 6 months later, Alexander Carter was standing not in the wheelchair that had been his companion for 2 years, not being pushed or assisted, standing on his feet with 2 carbon fiber canes that cost more than a compact car. But still on his feet, the Carter Global Auditorium was full. Employees, investors, media, and in the front row, Eleanor Carter with a silk handkerchief tight in her hands and tears she refused to let fall because Carters do not cry in public. Dear, we simply sweat through the eyes. Beside her, Claire Mitchell, now officially Vice President of Human Development, a position Eleanor had created specifically for her because someone must make sure this company remembers it's made of people, not robots, was biting her thumbnail. All right, Claire, she whispered to herself. Don't cry. You already cried 3 times today during breakfast, in the elevator. And when Sir Paws knocked over the favorite mug, you used up your tear quota. Lila, seated behind her, leaned forward. You're narrating again. It's an emotional day. Narration happens. Faire. Alexander began to walk. Step cane, slow, steady, but walking. The auditorium erupted in applause before he even reached the podium. He smiled the sincere smile Claire had taught him to rediscover and motioned for the audience to sit. Thank you, he said into the microphone. And yes, I checked 3 times this microphone works. Laughter filled the auditorium. Claire covered her mouth, smiling through tears. 2 years ago, Alexander continued, my life changed permanently. An accident put me in a wheelchair and forced me to rethink everything I believed about strength, control, and success. The auditorium was silent, every person absorbing his words. I spent a long time thinking strength was about standing about not needing help, about controlling everything around me. He paused, and then someone came into my life talking to elevators, narrating disasters, and accidentally reminding me that being human is not weakness, it is power. Claire felt her heart tighten. He was looking directly at her. This person taught me that vulnerability is courage, that asking for help is strength, that laughing at our own mistakes is freedom. Alexander took a deep breath, and because of that, today I'm pleased to announce a new initiative at Carter Global. A giant screen behind him lit up. Mitchell Project, giving voice to those who were silenced. Claire stopped breathing. The Mitchell Project, Alexander explained, is a mentoring and employment program for people who face barriers in the job market. People with disabilities, people who were silenced by systems that value perfection over potential, people who deserve a chance to show that chaos can be genius in disguise. Applause echoed. Claire was shaking. All right, Claire, she murmured, tears now falling freely. It's only the man you love honoring you in public with a multi-million-dollar program with your name. Breathe. Inhale. Exhale. Don't faint. Fainting would be embarrassing. Eleanor took her hand and squeezed it. He loves you, dear. I know. Claire wiped her tears. It's frightening and perfect at the same time. Alexander continued describing the program. Scholarships, corporate training, partnerships with accessibility organizations, and then he said, and to lead this project, we need someone who understands deeply that everyone deserves to be heard, someone who was never afraid to speak, even when she spoke to herself. He smiled. Claire Mitchell, do you accept? All eyes turned to her. Claire froze. What? To lead the Mitchell Project? Alexander looked at her with that expression that said, trust me. Do you accept? You're offering me a job in the middle of a corporate presentation with 300 witnesses. That is professionally questionable, completely. I accept. Applause exploded, standing ovation. The entire auditorium. Claire stood, her legs weak, and walked to the stage. Alexander held out his hand. She took it. You named an entire program after me, she whispered. You filled my entire heart with your presence. We're even. That was sentimental. It was sincere. Sentimental and sincere. He laughed, and the sound was picked up by the microphone, echoing through the auditorium. And then, because Alexander Carter never did anything halfway, he got down on one knee. Well, technically, he set one cane aside, held the other for balance, and went down on one knee with the grace of someone who had practiced that movement 50 times with Thomas, the physical therapist. The auditorium gasped all at once. Claire covered her mouth. Alexander, what are you? He took a small blue velvet box from his suit pocket. Claire Mitchell, he said, his voice trembling but steady. You walked into my life spilling coffee, talking to machines, and accidentally teaching me how to live again. You showed me that strength comes in unexpected forms, that love can be chaotic and perfect at the same time, that the best part of life is the part we cannot control. Tears streamed down Claire's face. "You're not doing this." "I'm absolutely doing this." He opened the box, revealing a diamond ring that probably had its own postal code. "Marry me. Be my partner, my best friend, my mental pom-pom cheerleader, my official narrator of disasters my whole life." Complete silence in the auditorium, 300 people holding their breath. Claire looked at him at the ring, at Eleanor in the front row waving frantically. "Say yes," at Lila recording everything on her phone, at the entire auditorium waiting. And then she did what she always did when she was nervous. She narrated, "Okay, Claire, the billionaire CEO is on one knee in the middle of an auditorium with a ring the size of a small planet. And you need to respond with real words, not internal narration. Real words now." Alexander was smiling. "It's a yes or no, my love." "Yes." The word came out like a sigh, a laugh, and a cry all at once. "Yes, 1,000 times yes." He slid the ring onto her finger, and the auditorium erupted. Applause, cheers, whistling. Ryan, the intern, shouted, "Did anyone call the press?" Alexander stood with effort, but he stood and pulled Claire into a kiss that made the last seated people rise to their feet applauding. When they finally parted, Claire whispered, "You planned this. The program, the proposal, everything. Months of planning with help from your mother? Of course, she chose the ring. Of course she did." Eleanor went up on stage, ignoring corporate protocol, and hugged them both. "Welcome officially to the family, dear. You always were. But now it's legal." 3 months later, the wedding took place in the garden of the Carter estate, a place that looked like it came out of a fairy tale, with hundreds of hanging lights, white flowers everywhere, and an aisle Alexander had insisted on walking himself with canes slowly but standing. When Claire appeared at the end of the aisle in a simple and elegant white dress, hair loose with flowers woven through it, Alexander felt tears he did not try to hide. The ceremony was short, sweet, and interrupted only once when Claire murmured during her vows, "Okay, Claire, don't trip. Don't cry too much. Don't faint. This is the part where you promise to love him forever." Which honestly is easy because you already loved him since the cappuccino incident. The officiant paused. "Miss Mitchell, are you narrating your own vows?" "Sorry, habit." Alexander laughed so loudly, he had to lean on his canes. "Never change," he said. "I promise I won't." Then I promised to, and when the officiant declared them husband and wife, the kiss was witnessed by 200 guests, including Lila openly crying, Ryan recording everything, and Eleanor whispering to Thomas, the physical therapist, "I told you she was perfect for him." At the reception, Alexander stood to give the opening speech with cane slightly trembling but standing. "My wife," he began, and Claire gasped at the sound of the words, "taught me that the best stories are not about perfection, they're about imperfect people finding perfection in each other." He lifted his glass to Claire, the woman who arrived speaking to herself, and accidentally healed the silence in my life. "I love you forever." And as everyone toasted, Claire whispered, "Okay, Claire. You married a billionaire who walks with canes and loves you for talking to yourself. If this isn't a modern fairy tale, I don't know what is." Alexander heard and smiled because he always heard and always would, forever. And so ends the story of Claire Mitchell and Alexander Carter, from a barista who talked to coffee machines, to vice president of human development and wife of the CEO, from a billionaire in a wheelchair who fired assistants in minutes, to a man who learned to laugh, to love, and to walk again, not necessarily in that order, proving that sometimes the best stories begin with spilled coffee, unplanned comments, and someone brave enough to be authentically imperfect,